decisive next time? Will the leader of the government have the last word to overrule every contrarian opinion? Will the leader of the government finally nod his head in every cabinet meeting in favor of every progressive decision which pushes the economy, or will he allow controversies and absence of consensus to make sure that the decisions are not taken?
All right.
The difficulty with the UPA government was that every time a minister objected to a program or a particular project, they allowed it to hang in midair, and that's why in the last 2-3 months they had the onerous task of trying to clear some 7 lakh crore worth of projects, which probably will still have a lot of teething trouble. And I think it will be a challenge for the next government to actually put all these projects in motion, which are going to enlarge economic activity.
Kapil Sibal, answer that thought that perhaps the most important thing is to have a leader of the government with whom the buck stops, whose word is the last word, whose opinion is final. That's a clear suggestion that, in fact, the diarchy between Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh, which has split responsibility and powers to the Prime Minister's disadvantage, is perhaps one of the problems the economy's had to contend with and one of the reasons why India is not living up to its economic potential. How do you answer that direct charge?
That is why I guess, because of lack of leadership, we increased coal production from 341 million tons to 554 million tons. Because of lack of leadership, we built roads in the Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana, which were 1,10,000 kilometers to 3,89,000 kilometers. It was lack of leadership that increased power production from 1,10,000 megawatts of power to 2,34,000 megawatts of power. It was because of lack of leadership that we built 15 universities in 10 years as opposed to 14 universities in 50 years.
Okay.
It was lack of leadership that we got an average growth rate of 7.9% or 8.4% till 2012. It was lack of leadership. It was lack of leadership that got agricultural growth from 203 million tons to 63 million tons.
All right.
That's all lack of leadership according to Mr. Jaitley. It's time not to play politics. It's time to recognize that this government has delivered more than any other government in the history of India.
Oh, let me put that to both of them. First Sitaram Yechuri, then Arun Jaitley. Very much the same thought was part of the budget speech you heard today from the finance minister, who also said that he rejects the charge of policy paralysis. You heard Mr. Sibal literally reel out a whole set of statistics that he claims proves that this has been the most productive government in India's history. How do you respond to that, Sitaram Yechuri?
Well, I think, of course not. I mean, in the sense that all the statistics that Mr. Sibal has reeled out, which are true, by the way, I'm not disputing them, but it's as good as saying that both Mr. Sibal and me and Mr. Jaitley and you, Mr. Thapar, have all aged by 10 years during the last 10 years. I mean, there will be an advance that is taking place, I mean, because of time. But the question is, was that the best that we could use our potential for? I do not think so. I think it was on the contrary. On the contrary, the potential that we have as an economy to grow has been not merely underutilized, but many of the opportunities have been missed out because we have been missing the woods for the trees always. And that is to strengthen our domestic economy, domestic market, give the purchasing power to our people, like I was arguing earlier. Now, if you had done that, I think it would have been a much more vibrant economy that we would have had now, much more insulated from global shocks, and we are capable of doing that. We have no dearth of resources. That is the point.
Let me bring in Arun Jaitley on that same point.
You shift your focus inwards.
Arun Jaitley, Kapil Sibal says the most productive, the most effective economic management in India's history, and he's backed it up with a set of statistics that he believes proves that, in fact, the economy that he leaves behind after 10 years of UPA rule is in a far better shape than the one he inherited and far more productive than the one he inherited. And since the one he inherited was from you, how do you respond to him?
Well, I think in UPA 1, you had a reasonable growth rate predominantly because on account of the impetus of the policies from 1991 to 2004. UPA 1 had not taken any great initiatives, but it survived because of the past impetus. It was really during UPA 2 that a gloom had set in. Now, Mr. Sibal can pick up isolated statistics and say, because in 10 years some economic activity has to happen, this is what we've done. But the fact is, could you have done better? How is the world looking at India today? The world is not looking at India as one of the great investment destinations. In fact, investor after investor tell us that we are reasonably low as far as their priorities are concerned. It is this reversal which really has to take place. Secondly, let us not forget that Mr. Chidambaram in 2004 inherited a 8.5% growth rate. He leaves behind in his last 3 years an average of less than 5% growth rate. And that's not a great picture as far as the Indian economy is concerned.
In which case, gentlemen, let's take up that subject raised there by Arun Jaitley at the end of the show with what we began earlier, weren't able to do because he was missing, the assessment of the UPA as an economic manager of the country and Mr. Chidambaram as finance minister. I'm going to put that same thought to all three of you to get your different perspectives. First, Sitaram Yechuri, I asked you that question earlier, but I had to interrupt you because we got back Arun Jaitley at that point. Now, here's your chance. What is your assessment of the UPA as the economic manager of this country and of Mr. Chidambaram as finance minister?
As grossly underutilized or misutilized the potential that India has. And in fact, it has succeeded in creating during the last 10 years a further divide between the two Indias that are in the making. And you've had a situation where the Prime Minister himself had to decry the state of our human indicators, human development indicators, and which are abysmally low. I mean, it is indeed a shame, like he himself had said, that you are ranking behind Bangladesh in many of these parameters.
So
now the point is, was our potential, was our potential as an economy, was it fully utilized? I said no.
Okay.
On the contrary, the contrary, our strength.
Out of 10, how many points do you give the UPA for economic management?
I mean, if they want to pass, then maybe we can allow them to pass. But the point is, it's not a question of giving them marks and percentage. It's the question of what is the end result. The end result is, if it's greater misery in the country, then I'm sorry, whatever you're going to give the marks for, it is not the realization of what is Indian potential.
Arun Jaitley, I'm going to put the same question to you. What is your assessment of 10 years of UPA management of the economy, number one? And number two, what is your assessment of P. Chidambaram as finance minister? And number three, of P. Mukherjee before that?
Well, I'd rather not go into comments about individuals, but I would essentially say this, that UPA did have the manpower potential as far as the economic management is concerned to understand what the problem is and to suggest a roadmap by which we could utilize our potential at the very best. UPA was then loaded with the contradiction of really deciding to choose what path of economic management is to be undertaken. Do you go in for populism, which impacts on your vote banks, or do you go in for prudent economic management of this country? The economic managers probably would have wanted to go for a latter route. The party bosses suggested the former. In the process, the UPA got caught between two stools and therefore has gone out and probably will go out with a great sense of disappointment.
You've fallen between two stools, Kapil Sibal, is what Mr. Jaitley says. And let me add to that, that the great belief that Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Manmohan Singh and P. Chidambaram constituted a dream team that would fulfill India's potential and more, today seems as if it has been completely unfulfilled. For some, it seems as if it's turned into a nightmare instead. I'm going to leave you the last word. How do you defend your government's record as economic managers of the country?
No, I will defend it robustly, and I think the biggest achievement of this government has been that 140 million people have come out of poverty. You take any indicator, and I'll let Arun Jaitley and Sitaram choose that indicator. Apply it to 2004, then apply it to 2014, and you will come out with the same number. 140 million people in India have been taken out of poverty. Therefore, our policies have succeeded. Not only did we get an average growth rate of 8.4% in UPA2 from 2009 to 2012, it is the two global crises that stalled growth.
Okay.
That was not of our making. We are integrated into the global economy. We had to manage that situation. And I think Chidambaram and the previous finance minister managed it extremely well. And it's very interesting that neither Jaitley nor Sitaram Yechuri have contradicted the numbers that I gave. And I can add to those numbers in every context of the Indian economy.
Where is the opportunity
If the
to
question is,
contradict?
could we have done even better? Could we have even done even better? Yes, we could have perhaps done even better. But that doesn't mean that this government has not performed well. As I said, it has performed better than any other government in the past. In the NDA had 4% growth and 4.2% growth during the 5 years. And if they talk about corruption, remember
Mr. Sibbal, I'm running out of time. I'm going to leave you the last word, and your last thought was, this government has performed better than any other government in Indian history. Well, history will judge you, and maybe history will begin just in 2 months' time. But in the meantime, my thanks to all three of my guests for joining me, and my apologies that in between we had trouble first with Mr. Yechuri and then with Mr. Jaitley's line. But fortunately, they were all back. Goodbye. Good night.